Are comic shops enablers of a bad system? Do the local comic shop actually help prop up bad decisions by publishers, and should they go away? It's a point of view that keeps coming up more and more frequently. Why? Hey there, this is Perch. There's been a trend that started about a year ago, maybe a little bit more, and it's been increasing in volume. And it basically, the theory goes like this: that the publishers are broken and they're putting out bad comics and they're deliberately trying to infiltrate the minds of readers and the comic universe by destroying what came before it and inserting a social agenda based on wokeness and social justice politics and hard left ideas. But they're only successful because the local comic shop, the retailer, supports them and actually enables this system by continuing to push these comics on readers. And readers, duped into wanting their local comic shop to survive, wind up forking over their cash unwillingly to keep these companies in business. Is this true? I mean, it depends on your point of view. I'll clear one little thing up right away. The local comic shop has very little influence over the big publishers. It's been a talking point. In fact, one guy, the guy who used to respond in videos for for everything on Twitter, I I'll forget the guy's name. Anyway, he lives in Hawaii. Anyway, I would post things from time to time, and he would sometimes reply to me with a video going, "Man, I know you're just a poor, helpless comic shop that is taken advantage of by the big publishers, and they're just forcing you under duress to sell these comics. And I know you don't want to, but you've got to keep your business alive, so you're just a patsy." And I always used to see these videos and kind of not smile, but just it's a very bizarre take. The majority of comic shop owners are doing it because they love it, or because they have a long history in it, or because for them it's a life, it's a means to a living. If these people felt like they hated their job, like they didn't want to be there, like they were forced by Marvel and DC to sell their wares against their will, they wouldn't keep doing it. It's too hard. You wouldn't live a substandard life where you're barely squeaking a profit because you feel indebted to these other companies, to these publishers. They're not giving us a bribe. There's no bag of money that comes from Marvel and DC that says, "Hey, keep this store open and we'll keep giving you the sweet sweet cash." No, they're quite the opposite. You're right, the publishers do very little to support the local comic shop, and that does suck. I mean, like I've talked about in the past, I think the publishers and the big creators could do a lot more to promote the comic shop, not just occasionally kind of wink wink nod nod. "Oh yeah, I love my local comic shop," like a lot of people do. Some of the big creators will say, "I'm big fans of shops," but when pressed, they can't name them. And others are quite supportive. It's not a simple blanket statement. But the big publishers themselves, they're not doing a lot of marketing for the local comic shop, and if there was nothing in it for the local comic shop, they would just stop. They would sell something else, go into business doing something else. It's not like a trap business. It's not like you're kept just barely on the brink of profitability where you don't really have a living. Comic shop people would go off and do other things. Now, your local comic shop in your town may bemoan the fact that they're not making more money, and they be frustrated about the helpless situation they find themselves in with the publishers. That's all true. But that's a very different from saying they're unwittingly keeping these bad systems alive. It's also a false statement to say the local comic shops don't ever voice their complaints to the publishers. They do all the time. Now, granted, I don't think the publishers listen in most cases, but it's not like the local comic shops are exactly keeping their mouths shut. There's an article that was posted by Bleeding Cool some time ago about a retailer that spoke up and got angry at the wokeness of Marvel Comics and turned the whole little seminar on its ear during the New York City Comic Con. Well, I was there. I wasn't the guy that spoke up, but that story was very, very massively exaggerated. It was written like some brave person got up and just started haranguing David Gabriel. That didn't happen. Not like that. But comic shop retailers, when they get to these shows and these retailer breakfasts, they do tend to be a kind of a rowdy bunch. They do tend to argue or grumble at things. They'll clap at things that are pleasant to them and they'll boo things that aren't. They'll go find various Diamond reps or Marvel reps or DC reps and talk them up about what they want done. They're usually the same 5 or 6 ideas every time. And it's true. In most cases, the publishers don't listen. But this is not uncommon. People act like this is the only business that works that way. Well, go down the street to any kind of shop. This is what it's like when you're in a B to B to C relationship. Well, what does that mean? It's a business to consumer. The publishers, in this case, are the business. The comic shop is another business, and the consumer is you. The publisher needs to sell the comics to the business, meaning the local comic shop, meaning me, so I can sell them to you, the customer. In theory, what the publisher, the person with the most amount of money and authority and control in this situation, should do is entice the customer with big plans and give nice, easy incentives for the business they're selling to get those comics into the customer's hands. And they do some things and they do other things very poorly. The whole variant cover incentive scheme, that's an example of doing it very poorly. And unfortunately, Marvel and to a lesser extent DC are very addicted to that system. They do it all the time. I wish they wouldn't, but unfortunately, at the local comic shop level, there's kind of 2 classes. There's a giant class, that's your Midtown, that's your Mile High, those are your big retailers. And then you have your other class, those are the small guys. There's really not a middle, which is a problem for the business as a whole, as I've talked about in the past. The big guys, they'll order into those variant schemes because it's easy for them to do so. They're ordering thousands of copies of every issue. That's where the bulk of the money is coming from. And that is dangerous. It's very dangerous for the industry because if one of those topples, it takes a huge chunk out of the business. But it also means that those big guys tend to set the standard. The comic publishers will behave and will act nice toward them. They know where their bread is buttered. And when you go to conventions, you'll see luncheons and meetings and drinks, often paid for by the big comic shops, to the publishers. They'll take several of those people out. Those are the people getting the meetings. Those are the people getting the dinners. It's just the way the business works. But on the other end, don't cry for the local comic shop, the small guys, too quickly. It's true, we don't have control, and I wish we did. I wish we had a lot more say in what was going on. We're also offering at a much smaller scale, which means our risks are lower. Now, nobody wants a comic shop to go out, and nobody wants a little comic shop to go out. Well, I take that back. There are definitely people who do, and increasingly, it's the fans. A while back, the crowdfunding exercise, partially through Jawbreakers, but through a couple others, it created this odd splinter, and the splinter was the comic shops are against us. If they were for us, they'd be carrying these crowdfunded comics. They'd be carrying Jawbreakers. But unfortunately, that's not really the case. Comic shops would generally be happy to carry whatever comes through the doors if it will sell. Now, it's true, a small handful, and this is a fact, very small handful of retailers objected to carrying Jawbreakers. They made their position known. They were public about it in most cases. Yeah, they weren't at first. They acted negatively behind closed doors, but it tends to be these same small handful of retailers that act negatively to a lot of things. There's always something they're unhappy about. I can say this because there's plenty of Facebook groups I'm in where they're always complaining. And they complained about that comic and they stated they weren't going to carry it. Now, we're talking about 1 out of 100 shops that complained. So please don't take out your ire on a shop not carrying a crowdfunded comic on the other 99 shops. Most people, like I said, would be happy to carry it if somebody walked through the door and wanted it. And several shops do. There are quite a few shops that have cyberfog that they ordered so they could sell it to people, or they fulfilled a commission and an order. The shop doesn't care. The most successful shops are pretty apolitical. They don't get involved one way or another. Their goal is to serve the customer, whatever their politics are. That's the business. So, to kind of wrap up this thought, look, comic shops are there to serve you, the consumer. If you like what they're selling, you should buy it. If you don't like what they're selling, you shouldn't buy it. I've said this over and over, and people want to argue with me, and they take the most convoluted, dumb routes to get there. And yet, dumb. If you don't give your money to a place just because you feel obligated to support it. Comic shops are not a charity. If you really feel like you have to give your money to someone to save them, go find somebody who's starving. Go find a shelter somewhere. Give your money to a true charity. Give your money to the country of Japan and the relief efforts for the typhoon they're having. There's plenty of places to give your money that is a true charity. Don't give money as a charity to a business, any business, and not your local comic shop. If your comic shop treats you well, if the owner does nice things for you, if they set your comics by, if you have a good relationship, then you should be loyal to it. But keep in mind, you should be loyal to it because you want the product they're providing. Don't be loyal to it just out of obligation. That sets up a bad relationship for you and the shop. You should feel good about how you're spending your money. Period. If you don't, stop spending your money there. That's the simplest way to put it. This isn't a sitting on the fence, some are good, some are bad kind of statement. This is all about you, the consumer. You remember earlier when I said there was a B to B to C chain? It's a chain that requires activity from all three parties. Yeah, I wish the publishers did a lot of things differently. Absolutely. As the middle business, I tell them that quite frequently, I promise you, as do a lot of the shops. But the most important part of that chain is you, the consumer, the person with a wallet, the person with the cash. Spend your money where you feel good about it, and you'll be a happier person. And if you start feeling bad about how you're spending your money, reevaluate what you're doing. Anyway, that's it. It's really that simple. Now, I know a lot of people have made it complicated with a lot of other pieces and a lot of other what ifs and a lot of other scenarios, and you can debate those scenarios all day long. But at the end of the day, there's only one person who takes money out of your pocket. Well, two, the government also takes money out of your pocket. But there's really only, we're going to say there's only one person that takes money out of your pocket, and that is you. If you ever feel bad about it, stop. Hey, if you like this video, like, subscribe, tell a friend. Please tell a friend. It's time we started correcting some of this argument that's gone on because it's silly. It's a silly discussion, and it's getting people nowhere. So share the video. And yeah, I'm sure for some of you who've drank the Kool-Aid, you'll object, you'll disagree. But remember that last statement. It's your money. Don't take your money out of your wallet. If you don't take your money out of your wallet, be happy. Thanks for listening.